Millionaire laughed as he looked down at the little flower girl, her hands trembling as she held out a few roses. With a mocking smile, he said, "Sell me these roses in Arabic, and I'll pay you $100,000. The people around chuckled, but no one expected what happened next. The girl couldn't have been more than 8 years old. Her clothes were worn, her shoes had holes, and dirt smudged her cheeks. She stood outside the entrance of the Grand Plaza Hotel, where Alexander Reed had just finished a business lunch. He was surrounded by colleagues who laughed at everything he said, eager to stay in his good graces. Before we continue, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to The Goodness Effect. The little girl stepped forward again, her voice barely a whisper. "Please, sir, just one rose. $5. Alexander's eyes narrowed. He hated being approached by street vendors, especially children. They made him uncomfortable, reminding him of things he preferred to forget. "I said no," he snapped. "Go bother someone else." But the girl didn't move. She looked up at him with large brown eyes that held no anger, only quiet determination. "My mother is sick. I need to buy her medicine." The colleagues shifted uncomfortably. One of them, Marcus, cleared his throat. "Come on, Alex. Just buy a rose and let's go." Something in Marcus's tone irritated Alexander. He didn't like being told what to do, even indirectly. An idea formed in his mind, a way to put everyone in their place and have some entertainment. He turned back to the girl with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Tell you what," he said loudly, making sure everyone nearby could hear. "I'll buy all your roses, every single one, and I'll pay you $100,000 for them." The girl's eyes widened. The crowd that had gathered gasped. Marcus looked confused. But Alexander continued, raising one finger. "There's a catch. You have to sell them to me in Arabic. Perfect Arabic. If you can do that, the money is yours." The crowd went silent. The little girl stood frozen, clutching her roses. Alexander's smile widened. He knew he'd cornered her. What were the chances a poor flower girl from the street spoke Arabic? He'd made his point. These people needed to know their place. "Well," he pressed. "What do you say?" "Can't do it." "I thought so." The girl looked down at her roses, then back up at Alexander. Her small fingers tightened around the stems. The thorns pressed into her skin, but she didn't seem to notice. "How do I know you'll really pay?" she asked quietly. Alexander laughed. "The audacity of this child. You're questioning me? Do you know who I am?" "No," she said simply. This drew more chuckles from the crowd. Alexander's jaw tightened. He pulled out his phone and opened his banking app, turning the screen toward her. "There, see that balance? I have more money than you'll see in 10 lifetimes. Now, are you going to try, or are you going to admit you can't do it?" The girl studied the screen, then looked at the faces around her. People had their phones out now, recording. This was becoming a spectacle. She took a deep breath. "I'll do it," she said. Alexander hadn't expected that. He'd assumed she would back down, maybe cry. Certainly leave. But there was something in her voice, a steadiness that surprised him. Still, he recovered quickly. "Excellent," he said. "Everyone here is my witness. If she can sell me these roses in proper Arabic, I'll transfer $100,000 to her right now. But if she fails," he looked down at the girl, "you leave and never come back to this street. Deal?" The girl hesitated for only a moment. "Deal." Marcus stepped forward. "Alex, this isn't necessary. Stay out of it." Alexander cut him off. "This is between me and the flower girl. Everyone ready? Start recording. I want this documented." The girl stood straighter. She wiped her hands on her dress, leaving dirt streaks on the faded fabric. Then she held up the roses and began to speak. The words that came from her mouth were flawless Arabic. Not just simple phrases, but eloquent, beautiful Arabic that flowed like poetry. She described the roses, their color, their fragrance, the way they had been grown. She spoke of her mother's illness, but not in a pleading way. She spoke with dignity, explaining that these flowers represented hope, that buying them would be an act of kindness that would be remembered. Alexander's smile faded. The crowd had gone completely silent. Even the traffic noise seemed to dim. The girl's voice carried clearly, each word pronounced perfectly, each phrase constructed with a sophistication that seemed impossible from someone so young. She spoke for nearly 2 minutes, never stumbling, never hesitating. When she finished, she lowered the roses and waited. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Alexander felt dozens of eyes on him, waiting to see what he would do. His mind raced. This couldn't be happening. Where had this street child learned such perfect Arabic? And not just street Arabic, she had used classical phrases, formal constructions. She had spoken like an educated adult. That wasn't real Arabic, he finally said. She memorized some sounds. That proves nothing. An older man stepped forward from the crowd. He wore a traditional white thobe and had a neat grey beard. "Excuse me," he said with a slight accent. "I am Professor Khalil al-Rashid from Dubai. I teach Arabic literature at the university." That child spoke perfect classical Arabic. Not only that, she quoted from classical poetry. I recognized verses from al-Mutanabi. Alexander felt heat rising in his face. "That's impossible. She's a street vendor." "And yet she did it," Professor al-Rashid said calmly. "I suggest you honor your word." The phones were still recording. Alexander could see himself on multiple screens, could imagine this spreading across social media within minutes. He was trapped. If he refused to pay now, he would look like a fraud, a bully, a man who went back on his word. His reputation would be destroyed. "Fine," he said through clenched teeth. He pulled out his phone. "What's your payment information?" "I don't have a bank account," the girl said. "Of course you don't," Alexander muttered. He looked around. Someone get her payment details. Someone must know her. An elderly woman stepped forward. "I know her grandmother. I can accept the payment and make sure she gets it." Alexander wanted to refuse, to find some technicality to escape this situation. But too many people were watching. He took the woman's information and made the transfer. The crowd watched as the confirmation appeared on the screen. $100,000. Gone. To a child who had made him look like a fool. The girl took the roses and held them out to him. "Your flowers, sir." Alexander snatched them from her hand. "Happy now? You got your money. Now leave." But the girl didn't leave. She looked at him with those same calm eyes. "Why did you do this? What? Why did you try to humiliate me? What did I do to you?" The question hung in the air. Alexander felt the crowd's attention sharpen. This was a moment that could define him, and he knew it, but he was too angry to care about being wise. "Because people like you need to learn their place," he said coldly. "You come begging at our feet every day. Maybe this will teach you that the world doesn't owe you anything." The girl nodded slowly, as if she'd expected this answer. "My name is Amira," she said, "and I didn't learn Arabic to win bets. I learned it because my father was from Syria. He was a professor, like that man there. He taught me every night before he died. He told me education was the only thing no one could ever take from me." He was right. She turned to leave, then paused. "You have a lot of money, sir, but I don't think you're very rich." Those were her last words before she walked away, the elderly woman following her. The crowd began to disperse, but slowly, people were still recording, still watching Alexander. He could feel their judgment, like physical peace. Marcus approached carefully. That didn't go well, Alex." "Shut up," Alexander said. He threw the roses in a nearby trash can and walked toward his car. His driver opened the door, and he climbed in, pulling out his phone. Already, the videos were appearing online. His hands shook as he scrolled through the posts, the comments, the shares. Within an hour, millions would see this. The millionaire who mocked a poor girl and got outsmarted. The arrogant businessman who got taught a lesson by a child. His phone rang. His publicist. He ignored it. It rang again. His business partner. Ignored. Again. His mother. He almost ignored that too. But something made him answer. "Alexander." His mother's voice was quiet. "I just saw the video. What were you thinking?" The story exploded online within hours. The video had been captured from multiple angles, and someone had edited them together into a seamless narrative. Alexander watched himself on screen, his mocking smile, his cruel words, the way he'd thrown the roses in the trash, and then Amira, small and dignified, walking away with her head high. The comments were brutal. People called him everything from entitled brat to much worse. Someone had researched his background and posted about his own humble beginnings, something Alexander never discussed publicly. His father had been a factory worker. His mother had cleaned houses. They'd lived in a cramped apartment where Alexander shared a room with two brothers. He'd gotten a scholarship to business school, worked 3 jobs simultaneously, and built his wealth through determination and ruthlessness. But none of that mattered now. All people saw was a rich man bullying a child. His phone wouldn't stop ringing. He'd turned off notifications, but they still piled up by the thousands. His publicist, Jeremy, finally reached him the next morning. We need to do damage control, Jeremy said. Fast. This is spreading faster than anything I've ever seen. You're trending globally. What do you suggest? Alexander asked tiredly. He hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Amira's face, heard her quiet words. Public apology. Donation to charity. Maybe we find the girl and do a photo op. No, Alexander cut him off. No photo ops with her. That would be worse. Then what? Because doing nothing isn't an option. Your board is meeting tomorrow. I've heard whispers about replacing you as CEO. Your investors are nervous. Several clients have already pulled out of deals. Alexander sat up. What? Which clients? Jeremy listed 3 names, major accounts. Millions in revenue, gone overnight. This is insane, Alexander said. It's one video. One moment. One moment that showed the world who you really are, Jeremy said bluntly. Or at least who they think you are. And perception is reality in our world. You know that. Alexander did know that. He'd built his career on understanding how to manipulate perception, how to craft an image. But he'd never been on this side of it, never been the target. Set up a press conference, he finally said. Tomorrow morning, I'll make a statement. Good. I'll prepare something for you to read. No, Alexander said. I'll write it myself. He hung up and sat in the silence of his penthouse apartment. 40 floors above the city, surrounded by expensive furniture and art he barely looked at anymore. Through the window, he could see the street where he'd met Amira. From up here, people looked like ants. Insignificant, easy to forget. But he couldn't forget her, her perfect Arabic, her dignity. The way she'd looked at him when she said, "You have a lot of money, but I don't think you're very rich." His phone buzzed again. A news alert. Someone had found Amira and interviewed her. His stomach clenched as he opened the article. The article's headline read, "The flower girl who humbled a millionaire speaks out." Below it was a photo of Amira sitting in what appeared to be a modest but clean apartment. She wore a simple dress, her hair neatly braided. Next to her sat an elderly woman, presumably the grandmother. The reporter had asked her about the encounter. Amira's response was measured, mature beyond her years. "I don't hate Mr. Reed," she'd said. "I was sad for him. He seemed very angry, and I think angry people are usually hurt people. My father taught me that." The article went on to detail her life. Her father, Dr. Hassan al-Najjar, had been a literature professor in Damascus. When the war came, the family had fled. They'd made it to Turkey, then eventually to this country. But Hassan had developed cancer. The treatment was expensive. They'd run out of money. He died 6 months ago, leaving Amira, her mother, and her grandmother with nothing but debt. Amira had started selling flowers to help pay for her mother's medication. Her mother had diabetes and needed insulin. She couldn't afford. Every day after school, Amira would buy flowers wholesale and sell them on the streets, making just enough to get by. But she still studied. Every night, she read her father's books. She practiced Arabic, determined not to forget the language of her father's homeland. She dreamed of becoming a teacher someday, like he had done. The article included a quote from Professor al-Rashid, who'd witnessed the confrontation. That child spoke Arabic at a university level. The phrases she used, the poetry she referenced, most of my students couldn't do what she did. She's remarkable. The reporter had asked Amira what she planned to do with the $100,000. "Pay my mother's medical bills," she'd said immediately. "Buy her medicine for a long time. Maybe there will be enough left for my grandmother's rent, and if there's anything after that, I'll save it for school." No mention of toys. No mention of anything for herself. Just practical necessities, spoken in the matter-of-fact tone of a child who'd grown up too fast. The reporter's final question was about Alexander. Did she forgive him? Amira had thought for a long moment. "My father used to say that forgiveness isn't about the other person. It's about not letting their actions make you bitter. So yes, I forgive him. But I hope he learns something from this." Alexander read the article 3 times. Then he read the comments. Unlike the vicious ones on his own videos, these were supportive of Amira. Thousands of people offered to donate more money. A scholarship fund had already been started in her name. A local restaurant had offered to provide meals for her family. The community had rallied around her. And what had rallied around him? Anger, disgust, rejection. His phone rang again. His mother. "Did you read the article?" she asked. "Yes. Alexander," she said gently. "Do you remember when you were her age? When your father lost his job and we had to move in with your aunt? You sold newspapers on the corner to help us buy groceries. He did remember. The shame of it. The way people would walk past without looking at him. The cold mornings when his fingers went numb. The hunger that gnawed at his stomach. That was different, he said automatically. How? His mother asked. How was it different? Because we were in a different country? Because your skin was a different color? Or because you don't want to remember that you were once exactly like her? The question pierced something deep inside him. He couldn't answer. I didn't raise you to be cruel, Alexander, his mother continued. I don't know what happened to make you this way, but it needs to stop. Tomorrow, when you give your press conference, you need to mean what you say. Not for your business, not for your reputation, for your soul. She hung up before he could respond. The next morning, Alexander stood behind a podium in a hotel conference room. Cameras pointed at him from every angle. Reporters filled every seat. Jeremy stood in the back, nervous and pale. Alexander had written and rewritten his statement a dozen times. Each version felt hollow, artificial. Finally, at 3 a.m, he'd deleted everything and started from scratch. What emerged was something he'd never planned to say publicly. The truth. Thank you for coming, he began. His voice sounded strange to his own ears. I'm not going to read a prepared statement from my publicist. I'm just going to tell you what happened, and why. Jeremy made a small noise of distress in the back. Alexander ignored him. 2 days ago, I did something cruel. I saw a little girl trying to make money to help her sick mother, and instead of helping her, I decided to humiliate her. I turned her desperation into entertainment. When she exceeded my impossible challenge, I was angry instead of impressed, and when she walked away with dignity, I threw her roses in the trash. He paused, taking a breath. I've spent the last 2 days asking myself why I did that. Why I looked at this child and felt the need to put her down, and I realized something uncomfortable. I saw myself in her, the version of myself I've spent 20 years trying to forget. Murmurs rippled through the room. Alexander pressed on. I grew up poor. My father worked in a factory, my mother cleaned houses. We barely made ends meet. When I was Amira's age, I sold newspapers to help buy food. I wore hand-me-down clothes. I knew what it was like to be invisible to people with money. He gripped the podium edges. But instead of remembering that with compassion, I buried it. I convinced myself that I was different from other poor people, that I'd somehow earned my way out while they hadn't. That success was just about working hard, and if others were still struggling, it was their fault. That lie made it easier to stop seeing them as human beings. It made it easier to become the kind of person who mocks a child selling flowers. The room was completely silent now. Amira didn't just speak perfect Arabic that day. She taught me something I'd forgotten. That dignity isn't about money. That education and wisdom aren't limited to people who can afford expensive schools. That the value of a person has nothing to do with their bank account. He pulled out his phone and brought up a document. I'm establishing a scholarship fund with $10 million. It will go to children of refugees and immigrants who want to pursue education. I'm also donating $5 million to organizations that provide medical care for families who can't afford it. And I'm personally guaranteeing that Amira's mother receives the care she needs for as long as she needs it. Hands shot up. Questions shouted. Alexander raised his hand for quiet. I know what you're thinking, that this is just damage control, that I'm trying to buy back my reputation. Maybe that's partly true. I won't lie and say my motivations are pure, but I also know that money talks louder than words. I can apologize all day, but it won't change what I did. Action might. Not for me. I don't deserve forgiveness. But for people like Amira, who deserve better than a world where men like me think we can treat them as less than human. He stepped back from the podium. I'll take questions now. The questions came fast and aggressive. Was this genuine or calculated? Would he step down as CEO? What did his board think? Did he expect Amira to forgive him? He answered honestly, even when it hurt. Yes, part of this was calculated. He wasn't a saint. No, he wouldn't step down unless the board forced him out. No, he didn't take Amira's forgiveness, and he wouldn't seek it. She owed him nothing. 3 days after the press conference, Alexander sat in his office reviewing quarterly reports. The crisis hadn't ended, but it had stabilized. Some clients had returned, others hadn't. The board had voted to keep him on, but his power had been curtailed. He now answered to oversight committees. His decisions were questioned. His authority had limits. Surprisingly, he didn't hate it. The constant scrutiny forced him to think differently, to consider perspectives beyond profit margins and market share. His assistant knocked on the door. "Mr. Reed, there's someone here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's important." "Who is it?" "A woman named Mrs. Haddad. She says she's Amira's grandmother." Alexander's heart jumped. "Send her in." The elderly woman from the street entered his office. She wore a headscarf and a long dress, carrying herself with quiet dignity. Alexander stood and offered her a chair. "Mrs. Haddad, thank you for coming. Can I get you anything? Water? Coffee?" "No thank you." She sat down, studying him with sharp eyes. "I came because Amira asked me to give you something." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small object wrapped in cloth. When she unwrapped it, Alexander saw a book, old, worn, with Arabic text on the cover. "This was my son's favorite book," Mrs. Haddad said. "Poetry by al-Mutanabi. The same poet Amira quoted that day on the street. Hassan would read this to her every night before bed. He would explain the meanings, teach her about the history, the context. He believed that language carried culture and culture carried identity. He didn't want his daughter to forget who she was, even in this new country. She held the book out to Alexander. "Amira wants you to have it. She said maybe it will help you remember who you are too." Alexander took the book with trembling hands. "I can't accept this. It's too precious." She insisted. Mrs. Haddad said firmly. "Amira is wise beyond her years. She sees things others don't. She saw something in you that day. Not just the cruelty, but the pain underneath it. She wants you to heal." Alexander opened the book. The pages were filled with Arabic script he couldn't read, but there were also notes in the margins, in English. Hassan's handwriting explaining verses, making connections, sharing insights. And in smaller handwriting, clearly a child's, were additional notes, Amira's thoughts, her questions, her father's answers. "This is a record of their relationship," Alexander said softly. "Yes," Mrs. Haddad agreed, "and she's sharing it with you. Not because you deserve it, but because she believes you might need it." Alexander looked up at her. "Why? After what I did?" Mrs. Haddad smiled sadly. "Because Amira understands something that took me many years to learn. Hurt people, hurt people. And the only way to break that cycle is through kindness, not more hurt. You were cruel to her because someone somewhere was cruel to you, and you buried that hurt under success and money until you forgot it was there. But it was still there, making you hard. And you cold." Amira recognized it because she's felt that kind of pain too, but she chose a different path. She stood to leave, then paused. "My son used to say that wealth measured in money disappears when you die. But wealth measured in wisdom, in kindness, in the lives you touch positively, that lasts forever. He was a poor man by the world's standards, but he died rich in all the ways that matter. Think about what kind of rich you want to be, Mr. Reed." After she left, Alexander sat alone with the book for a long time. He turned the pages slowly, reading Hassan's notes, seeing the love in every word. Here was a man who had lost everything, his country, his career, his health, but had never stopped teaching his daughter, had never stopped believing in beauty and wisdom and hope. Alexander thought about his own father, who had died 5 years ago. They'd been estranged at the end. His father had been disappointed in Alexander's ruthlessness, his disregard for people he considered beneath him. They'd argued the last time they spoke. Alexander had said some terrible things. His father had died before they could reconcile. "You're becoming someone I don't recognize," his father had said during that final argument. "You're becoming the kind of person who used to look down on us." Alexander had dismissed it as jealousy, as his father's inability to understand the business world. But his father had been right. He had become that person. Exactly that person. 6 months passed. Alexander made changes, real changes. He reviewed every aspect of his business, looking for places where he prioritized profit over people. He found many. Some he could fix immediately, others required time and effort. But he worked at it consistently. He volunteered at a refugee center, teaching business skills to newcomers trying to start their own ventures. At first, people were suspicious of his motives. But he showed up every week, answered questions, shared his knowledge without condescension. Slowly, they accepted him. He read Hassan's book every night. With the help of a translator, he began to understand the poetry, the wisdom contained in those ancient verses. He started learning Arabic himself, working with a tutor 3 times a week. It was humbling to be a beginner again, to struggle with pronunciation, to make mistakes. but it was also humanizing. He saw Amira once, from a distance. She was walking home from school with friends, laughing about something. She looked like what she was, a child, happy, carefree, unburdened. He didn't approach her. That wasn't his place, but he was glad to see her thriving. The scholarship fund he'd established was supporting 12 students now. He met with each one personally, heard their stories, learned about their dreams. They reminded him of who he'd been: hungry, driven, desperate for a chance. He made sure they got more than chances. He gave them mentorship, connections, opportunities. His business recovered, though not to its former heights. Some damage couldn't be undone. But it was more stable now, more ethical. His employees respected him more, even if they feared him less. His board challenged him more, which made him sharper. His life was smaller but fuller. One evening, his mother visited his apartment. She looked around at the changes he'd made. Fewer expensive trinkets, more books. Photos on the walls now, including old family pictures he'd kept kettened for years. "This looks like a home," she said approvingly, "not a museum." "It's a work in progress," he said. They sat on the balcony, looking out over the city. Somewhere down there, Amira was probably doing homework, helping her grandmother make dinner, reading her father's books, living a life that had more than anything Alexander had accumulated in 20 years of success. "Have you forgiven yourself?" his mother asked quietly. Alexander thought about it. "No, I don't think I ever will completely. What I did was wrong. But I've stopped trying to justify it or forget it. I keep it with me as a reminder." "Of what?" "Of who I was, and who I don't want to be again." His mother patted his hand. "Your father would be proud of you. It takes courage to change." After she left, Alexander sat alone in the darkness. His phone buzzed with messages. Always demands on his time. But for once, he ignored them. Instead, he opened Hassan's book and read by the light of the city. There was a verse Hassan had marked heavily, with a note that read this to Amira when she feels small. The worth of a person is not determined by the material they accumulate, but by the character they cultivate. One may possess kingdoms yet be bankrupt in spirit. Another may possess nothing yet be wealthy beyond measure in wisdom, in love, in integrity. Choose your riches wisely, for only one kind survives death. Alexander read it several times. Then he took out his own pen and wrote in the margin, in English, beneath Hassan's note, "I learnt this lesson from your daughter. Thank you for teaching her to see the humanity in everyone, even those who've forgotten their own. I will try to be worthy of that kindness." He closed the book and looked out at the city lights. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. He would make mistakes. He would struggle with old habits and new expectations. But he would keep trying. Not for redemption, he didn't believe he deserved that, but because a little girl selling roses had shown him that wealth and richness were not the same thing. And he wanted to be rich in the ways that actually mattered.